Ken Schramm joins me this week to discuss mead, our relationship with alcohol, and the future of homebrewing and mead making. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 326. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 326, and it's early June 2025. Ken Schramm joins me this week to discuss mead, our relationship with alcohol, and the future of homebrewing and mead making. Thank you to this week's sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They invite you to join their upcoming brewery workshop, September 14th to 17th in Fort Collins, Colorado. If you're launching a brewery, you don't want to miss this 4-day event featuring top professional brewers who help you explore, plan, and start your own brewery. To learn more, visit breweryworkshop.com. Again, that's breweryworkshop.com. And BeerSmith Web, the online version of BeerSmith brewing software. BeerSmith for the web lets you design great beer recipes from any browser, including your tablet or phone. Edit recipes on the go with access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try BeerSmith Web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, reminder to click that like and subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you're listening on. Clicking those buttons is a great way to support the show. Now let's jump into this week's episode. Today in the show, I welcome Ken Schramm from Schramm's Meadery. Ken wrote the book on mead making and called The Complete Mead Maker. Ken was also a founding member of the Mazer Cup and won numerous national awards, including a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Homebrewers Association. His meadery makes some of the highest-rated meads in the world, from fresh fruit, spices, and honey. Ken, it's always a pleasure to have you back on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm well, Brad. How are you?
You look good, man. You've been working out at the farm or what?
I have been earning my physique honestly.
Well, I last had the chance to meet you back at HomebrewCon in 2023. Of course, I've met you a number of times before that, but in San Diego. But no HomebrewCon in 2024, which kind of leads to my first question. Why is homebrewing and now craft brewing, and I believe even mead making, kind of in an extended slump?
I think there are a lot of reasons. I've never been one to believe that there is a single reason why things happen. For me, I think the pandemic had a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
People. There's a huge degree of community involved in all of the things you talked about. All of craft mead, craft beer, craft distilled beverages. People love to go and hang out at the places where those things happen and press flesh with the people who do it. They also like to go and sit and talk with fellow fans or fellow aficionados because it's a deep subject. Same thing is true with wine, and wine is suffering from the same situation.
Oh, really? Is it?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, all of beverage alcohol right now is having a tough go of it. I think that I think that cannabis has something to do with it. People are choosing to indulge in other drugs and use alcohol less.
Interesting.
I think that's something that I don't know how long lasting that will be, or if that will just simply be something. There's a permanent adjustment. I don't think alcohol will go away. Alcohol didn't go away when it was illegal. Alcohol didn't go away, has never gone away. Alcohol's been with us as part of human culture now for probably as long as there's been human culture. So I don't think it's going away, but I do think that there'll be a balance that's struck between the various other legal intoxicants and alcohol. I also think that there's a degree to which the neo-prohibitionist anti-alcohol movement in the country is affecting alcohol sales, and some of that may be.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying I want to talk about that in a minute. But COVID's kind of interesting to me. We saw a spike at the beginning of COVID because everybody's stuck at home, so they started buying brewing equipment and started brewing a little bit. But it didn't really last long at all.
No, and that whole communal nature of a lot of people started making their own pizzas too, and that didn't really last either. people needed people were looking for ways to get the things that they wanted without having to interact with other humans. But that didn't really change, I don't think, the underlying behaviors as much. Well, the isolationism of it was really unfortunate. I mean, the, the the loss of homebrew clubs, the loss of tasting groups, that impacted the way that people are interacting with craft beverages.
Mm-hmm.
People used to love to get together and share a table full of really interesting things and talk them all over and discuss them and point out likes and dislikes or favorites and rankings. And that was great. I mean, that was really terrific for craft beer. There were some aspects of it that were a little bit ephemeral, meaning that it's tough to build a client base on people who buy things one time to share them with their friends, as opposed to people who buy things on a regular basis to have them in their basement when they're going to have pizza or chili or whatever. That kind of pattern behavior is really essential to successful business development. But I think that the just the loss of that sharing minimized the amount of exposure that people got to really cool beverages. It broke the pattern behavior of people doing those things, which were really beneficial to the business.
Yeah, and I mean, I speak at a lot of homebrew clubs, and I've noticed virtually all of them are struggling and trying to build back up to, just a fraction of what they were before COVID. And then, of course, you mentioned, I think that you closed we were talking before the show, but you mentioned that you had to close your tasting room. And in fact, you've downsized somewhat. You don't have the same staff you did. At the same time, you were expanding to start growing on the farm, right?
Sure. I mean, that was kind of a perfect storm.
Yeah.
We had gone ahead and made an investment, a pretty big capital investment.
Sure.
That we were going to rely on a steady income stream to support, and then that income stream got hammered a little bit. We're still kind of struggling along, just like everybody in the craft world is. But that didn't help us, and it didn't help us in that both the lack of revenue affected us. But when we closed the tasting room, we had to stop employing people on a regular basis, and some of those people would come out and do shifts and work at the orchard, and that was really valuable. There's the stuff never stops. The weeds don't quit growing at any point just because you don't have as much staff. Nature calls, as they say, in so many different ways, and so that did cause problems. I mean, I'm working as much now in the field as I ever have, and it's a very physical endeavor to try and run an orchard. You're trying to keep plants in production and keep plants healthy and beat weeds and mow lawns and keep buildings maintained and keep equipment maintained. It's a very physical and challenging line of work.
Well, I did want to talk a little bit about that. Back in episode 289, actually, it was the last time I had you on, we talked about your effort to grow and compare various fruit varieties for the purpose of making mead. How are things going with the farm project? Last I talked to you, had I think 6 acres going.
It's about 6 acres. It's not all in production yet, because we have deer issues. The deer will assault everything that we don't have contained. And for right now, I mean, there are some things they won't eat. They won't eat black currants because they're just so full of that ketone and so high in acidity that they won't take them on. And there are a lot of other plants to protect themselves: gooseberries and raspberries. A lot of the brambles, they're called brambles for a reason. They all have spikes, and the deer don't necessarily love that. So they kind of protect themselves. But anything else like cherries or apples or plums, anything with leaves that the deer can take out, they have. And so we've only got as much area in production as we can enclose in an 8-foot high deer fence.
Wow.
So that's that, and we have to enclose the entire property, and that's another big chunk of dough.
Yeah.
Anyone out there wants to partner with a company that's doing an innovative and far-sighted work in the land of fruit cultivation for fermented beverages, let me know. Um, we have had a lot of success, though. I mean, you mentioned that we were just getting started when we last talked, and since then we have released the first set of single varietal fruit meads. We released a white currant. We released two different red currants. We
Wow.
released two different gooseberry meads. We've released three different black currant meads from varietal black currants. So yeah, we're doing what we set out to do. It's happened at a really small scale because that's just going to be how it works. You know, you can't have full production from the get go. You've got to build up, and we're building up.
Well, I mean, you're making, from what I understand, you're making test batches, really. I mean, you're
Yeah,
trying to find out
functional.
which varieties are worth growing here, right?
Right, and we've also figured out. I mean, part of that experiment as well was the agricultural part, which is, you know, here's this chunk of dirt and this sun exposure and these climatic conditions, and which varieties like those,
Mm-hmm.
which varieties will produce well, which varieties will grow well, which varieties. I think I may have mentioned this the last time we talked, but we tried to plant three different varieties of black currants.
Sure.
We planted Menage Smiriu, we planted Titania, and we planted Consort.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the straight up black currants. And then we also planted a golden currant, which some people also call a black currant, but called Crandall. Crandall did great. Menage Smiriu did great. Consort did great. Titania just didn't like our conditions at all. And we planted during an incredibly wet spring the first year we were on the orchard. The condition of root rot is when you have a spring that wet is a
A risk.
consideration.
Yeah.
And Titania got it and didn't like it, and instead of having 30 or 40 Titania plants, we had 3 or 5. And so we're still struggling to get that variety cranked back up again. So there's a lot we're learning.
Sure. Well, back in 2023, you coined the term noble fruits to describe fruits like raspberries that have high tannins and acidity and work well in mead.
Yep.
Can you cover those again really quickly?
Well, yeah, and raspberries are a bramble, right? Brambles are all those fruits with the little clumps that grow on vines that are perennial, and so all of those go into that category. That includes raspberries, blackberries, things like thimbleberries. They all have high acidity. We've been experimenting. We're growing boysenberry now, and that's a very difficult berry to grow in Michigan, but we're having a little bit of success. There are other berries, like loganberry, tayberry, that can be grown. So that also fall into that category of having like really rich flavor, high acidity, and moderate to high levels of sugar.
Sure.
So all the brambles, all of the currants, red currants, white currants. We're growing pink champagne currants.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there are the golden currants, the Ribus odoratum, also known as Crandall. I consider those to be noble fruits. Red currants, and we're growing 3 varieties of those. We're growing Rovada, Red Lake, and Jonquière Vantetz.
Mm-hmm.
I would consider gooseberries in that group. They are a similar plant to a ribus plant. They are thorny,
Yeah.
and they are a real bugger to pick. You have to. We wear heavy duty arm protection and gloves to pick them.
Sure.
Although you have to use fingerless gloves because you got to get to them. But those are great, and there are several varieties. I mean, many varieties of gooseberries. I wasn't cognizant of how many different varieties of gooseberries there are.
I had
But
no idea either.
gooseberries gooseberries were one of the most popular fruits in Victorian England, and
Interesting.
there were more than 100 varieties being cultivated in Great Britain, and they're great. They're really delicious. The ones that we have going right now are Hinnomaki Yellow, Hinnomaki Red, and let's see. So what was the last one we made? We did Hinnomaki Red, Hinnomaki Yellow. It's not Porman. Anyways, there are several varieties, and they're all terrific. They have thick skins. They have a lot of tannin in them. They have slightly tannic seeds, and high acidity levels. Acidity levels that are not as high as black or red currants, but higher than raspberries. I consider tart cherries one of the noble fruits.
Sure. Absolutely.
There are two kinds of tart cherries. There are the Amarels, and the Amarels are the varieties that have light skin and light juice, like Montmorency or Montmorency, depending on who you ask. And Meteor is another one that's like that. They're very delicious. But then the ones that are even more appealing to me are the Morellos. The Morellos are the cherries that are tart cherries that have really dark purple flesh and purple skin and purple juice, and that includes things like English Morello and Balaton, which is the one we use to make our charbake. Pardon me, charbake. Our statement from, and then charbakes, which are the classically famous variety from Belgium that are used in lambic beers and the statement reserve, which and the Heart of Darkness. Those are the kinds of cherries that are really incredible. Lutovka, Pozog, Olbashinska, they all fall in that morel category as well.
Wow.
And then there is one more kind of cool variety of quasi. I don't know if they're morellos or what they're considered, but there's a new set of cherries that have been released from a Saskatchewan breeding program, and they're attractive to people who are home brewers and mead makers because they're relatively easy to grow, and they're also really cold tolerant. They will fruit. They will fruit after brutally cold winters, and they will also fruit through later frosts than most other cherries will tolerate.
Oh, wow.
I'm having a bad year this year with my charbakes because I say a bad. We'll have a fair year, but the frost damage was pretty substantial this year.
We had a cold winter, yeah.
We did, and we had an early warm up, this is how this classically works. You had an early warm up and then some frost, and then you get bud damage.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the central group. I also think that there's going to be eventually. I'm giving you the fruits that are sort of native, or at least that can be cultivated in my area. I'm in the Great Lakes, in Michigan.
You're near Detroit, yeah.
Right. There are a lot of other fruits, though, that fit into that set of categories. The sugar levels are high, the flavor impact is big, and the acidity levels are high. Things like passion fruit that really do contribute all of the components that you want. Maybe not tannin, but they contribute the things that I would use to categorize a fruit as a noble fruit.
Sure.
And I think I mean maybe after I retire, I will have time on my hands to do the research on some of those other fruits and get the specifics, the specs, as it were, on those fruits to see how they line up in comparison with currants and raspberries and blah blah blah.
Yeah, nice. What did you find out actually using some of these fruits and meads, though? The ones that you grew. Big differences in varieties? Small varieties?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. The gooseberry meads that we made were terrific.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them came out really well. Well, I mean, we did learn, for example, with we released a white currant mead and we released a pink champagne currant mead, and they were very tart. I think the acidity in white currants and the acidity in pink currants is a little higher than it is even in red currants. I don't know if it's quite as high as it is in
Really?
black currants, but it's very high.
Hmm.
And so we're in that same condition that winemakers are in, which is you get to experiment once a year.
Yeah, you got to
Yep.
adjust your
Yep.
sweetness levels to balance it, I guess. Huh?
Yep. The other current. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I get dehydrated and then I can't think as well. No, the other currant that we use is one called Pixwell.
Okay.
And it's called Pixwell because it's got a few less thorns than Hinomaki red and Hinomaki yellow. But it doesn't have no thorns. There are no thornless gooseberries that we found that are worth their salt. But Pixwell came out beautifully. I don't think we're going to have to adjust that recipe at all. I don't think we're going to have to adjust our Hinomaki red recipe. We did two versions of a red currant. We did Jean Kier Van Tetz and we did Red Lake. And that was a real learning experience. I thought that Jean Kier Van Tetz would have the more aggressive and fruity aromatic profile, but it turned out that Red Lake did. Red Lake is not considered to be as quote unquote a high quality a culinary variety as Jean Kier Van Tetz. Jean Kier Van Tetz was softer, rounder, and instead of being like aggressively fruity and big cranberry, cherry, plummy kind of things going on, it was more floral, and that was both surprising and also really welcome. I mean, it's nice to know that there is going to be a red currant that we can use to create that kind of a mead. And I love them both. I can't say as I had a favorite. The Red Lake has a stronger forehand in tennis terms.
Yeah, I understand.
But I like them all. And the same thing is true with the black currant varieties that we did. They all stood very distinctly on their own, all very different. The consort is the black currantiest black currant there is. It has the highest level of that cat ketone, and they're also incredibly acidic. They're tiny. They're dark. I mean, just as black currants go, they're really black. They aren't like purple-ish.
Wow.
They're black, and when they're completely ripe, they're just very ebony, and they are also a pain in the butt to pick because they're much smaller than the other varieties are. Which means that the ratio of skin and seed to flesh is higher, and that the aggressive black currant character, which comes from
gives you more tannins, right? Yeah,
lots of tannin. Yep, lots of tannin, lots of skin, body and acidity. It was wonderful to see play out what we were hoping would play out, and I don't know if it's even avoidable if you're pretty decent with your production technique for these things to actually shine like you hope they will. But they definitely did. That was incredibly rewarding. And the nice thing is, I mean, there are a few people out there that got a set of the whole thing, and in 2 or 3 or 5 years, they should be magnificent expressions. That's the common term these days.
Yeah, the black currant meads, they just get better and better with age. Is what I found.
They sure do.
Yeah.
They sure do.
Well, another interesting question, though, I guess, is there any hope of scaling some of these things up? I mean, can you buy some of these varieties in larger quantities at some point?
Yeah, I believe so. The thing is, right now, when you buy black currants from commercial producers, you're usually getting a blend. you're usually getting and if you're buying from Poland, for example, you're getting a blend. There are some producers in Michigan that are starting to produce varietal black currants at scale,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to be really welcome for the mead making community if people are interested in doing those expressions. Yeah, there are some people that are starting to do that, and there are some people in New York that are doing the same thing as well.
Well, I'm glad to see black currants are back in production. Yeah, for a long time, they weren't grown, right?
No, no, they were pretty much a European commodity for a long time, because of the whole white pine blister, and they were banned in a lot of states. There
Right.
are still varieties. There are still varieties that I can't grow in Michigan. Varieties that I really, really want to grow that are famous from Poland and from Scotland, and they're banned,
Huh.
so I can't grow them.
Interesting.
Yep.
Well, today you actually wanted to talk a little bit more about our relationship with alcohol. And earlier you mentioned the modern push towards temperance or neo
Yep.
prohibitionism. I've really not heard much about this movement, but can you tell us a little about how it's affecting homebrewing, craft brewing in
Well,
2025?
sure. I don't know if everybody's like connecting the whole thing, um, but but things like dry January, right? Dry January didn't come from nowhere. It was concocted by a bunch of people who were interested in promoting the reduction of consumption, and some of that reduction of consumption can be health related, but I think some of it's also being driven by ideological people in the community. There are people out there who just don't like alcohol and who are interested in utilizing social platforms to discourage that behavior.
Hmm.
And I can understand that. There are some health reasons for that. I mean, certainly overconsumption of alcohol is not good for you,
No.
and I don't make a beverage that is intended for overconsumption. But on the other hand, the vilification of alcohol and the the attempt to promote abstinence for the sake of abstinence is going to have an impact on the alcohol business. If you tell people it's bad to drink and that you shouldn't ever drink, and promote things like Dry January, where you take functionally 8% of a company's annual marketing period and shelve it, well, that's going to have an impact on the trade,
Yeah.
right? It's gonna decrease revenues. It's going to put strain on things. It's going to it modifies product flow, right? And people in especially in beer, mead and wine are perhaps a little bit different, but if you're in a brewing situation, you're used to churning out beer on a consistent basis. You've got a production schedule that you're trying to maintain and keep your tanks full and keep everything moving along. And if someone comes along and says, "Yeah, we're for the month of January, we're going to tell you, no, don't bother," well, that's going to affect all of the aspects of the supply chain and the delivery process. The sort of the machine, the clockwork machining of your brewing practice, and mess it up.
I
uh,
mean, it's interesting.
yeah.
I really hadn't heard about dry January until probably this year. I remember do remember
Oh,
hearing about it. Was there a big impact this year for you?
oh, I think so. I didn't. Well, January is traditionally something of a down month. I mean, in the wine trade, and we're more similar to the wine trade than we are to the beer trade.
Sure.
And in the wine trade, people give each other a lot of bottles at Christmas, and so there's a big boost in wine as a gift, and then in January things fall off a little
Slow
bit.
down. Sure.
They do. They slow down consumption wise. The retailers, for the most part, though, I mean, January hasn't been a terrible month for us because if things have gone well over the holiday, the retailers have to restock their shelves.
Hmm.
They don't want to just have bare shelves. So there is some pickup that occurs then, and then February is a little slower. Well, February was a lot slower
Yeah.
for us, and that's I think part of that impact.
Interesting. Um, Well, isn't alcohol just one of the things that drives our complex lives and relationships with each other? And
Sure. Oh,
yeah,
sure. And I mean, there is a tendency in the media which grasps onto any story that it can get its hands on. And it's the insatiable maw of the news world is such that they need things to chew on all the time. And so a trendy thing like dry January or non-alcoholic beverages, it'll get a lot of attention. And there's also an inclination in the part of the media now, it's kind of a simplified thing that's going on to kind of reduce everything to heroes and villains and turn the entire spectrum of things that we interact with into a hero and a villain. And if you want to make alcohol the villain, then, well, that's a problem for me. I run my life based on the production of an alcoholic beverage that is intended to be consumed in moderation.
sure,
So that's one thing. But I also think that there's, in this whole media cycle, there's an inclination to grab onto this one thing and talk about it for a while. I mean, an example of that is CCD. We can talk about that later, but people talked about CCD a lot for a while, and then it kind of fades out. But if this non-alcohol trend catches on, or alcohol as the villain, and no alcohol as the hero, if that's the way the spectrum is going to be portrayed, it's going to have an impact on our business. And what I find fascinating is that we don't deal with that quite as much in the rest of our lives. I mean, we have complex relationships with everything. We have complex
sure.
relationships. We have complex relationships with transportation, right? We all need transportation. We use it all the time, and it kills people. It just does. And the same thing is true with a lot of other things. We have a complex relationship with tobacco. We have complex relationships with all kinds of things like prescription drugs and
I think food's a good example.
food is probably the best example. Food is the best example. Salt, refined sugar, fat. There are lots of things that we know have to be dealt with in moderation that are harmful. They're just
Processed
harmful.
foods, right?
Processed foods, absolutely, highly processed foods. And yet, I don't really see nearly as much of an abolition approach to those things. We're
Sure.
not trying to abolish fat. We're not trying to abolish sugar or
Potato chips.
salt or potato chips. Right. You don't see potato chip free January
It's true.
going on. We
It is.
don't do that.
It is interesting. I looked this up one day. Big beer. The big beer producers. Big beer has been in decline since the 1950s. Long-term trend, just slow. I mean, it's been slow, but consumption per person has been declining since the 1950s, and that's a pretty long trend. Now, obviously, craft beer has been down the last year or two, but
Right.
but I mean, just in general, beer consumption's been going downhill for what 60, 70 years.
Yeah, but craft went up and wine went up. And right now, the thing that's going up is excuse me, craft distilled beverages.
Yeah,
Kind
especially
of,
the prepackaged. All my brewing friends tell me that the prepackaged beverages are very popular. The vodka, I call them wine coolers, but they're wine coolers made with vodka, right?
well, I mean, the probably even more derisive term is Alco Pops.
Yeah,
And yeah, but those Alco Pops have been around forever. I mean, there's been Bartles and James wine coolers and Mike's Hard Lemonade for a long time.
yeah,
And I tend to believe that is as well a cyclical trend, right? There will be people who come on and decide that that's how they're going to approach their consumption of alcohol, and then the people who learn that, well, there's really actually incredibly delicious beverages that you can drink that are alcohol, contain alcohol, and they are built for moderation and really connoisseur enjoyment. That's part of the maturation process of populations all the time. when I was a kid, there was Boone's Farm and Ripple and Lord knows how many other really pretty much obnoxious, just barely flavored alcohol
Sure,
products.
sure.
And that hasn't gone away. All we're looking at right now with White Claw is the Boone's Farm of the 2020s. And
Certainly, there's trends, big trends. Zima is perhaps my favorite example, right?
oh sure,
The clear beer
sure,
trend.
right. That was. But I mean, the interesting thing there, and this is a challenge that craft has to deal with. Um, Mega alcohol has been really good at introducing the young consumer to alcohol through insipid little beverages like Zima and Bartles and James wine coolers and Mike's Hard Lemonade for a long time. It's a point of entry, and the consumer, all consumers in an age-based product like alcohol have a point of entry. How do you decide that you're going to do this? And you can choose to drink mixed drinks, or you can choose to drink pre-mixed drinks. And then there is the educational process, and that's where craft beer and craft mead have an obligation that they need to fulfill. And it's ethically complex. I mean, if you look at, when you talk about since the 1950s, if you look at how beer has been marketed to American consumers, especially young American consumers, there was Budman, there was a Ham's Bear, there have been horses that kick field goals and chameleons that talk, and all manner of gorgeous women who have been involved in the marketing of alcohol to get people to move into it. And it hasn't, very rarely has it been based on a quality spectrum, saying, look, this is what's really good about our product, and this is what
Sure.
we want you to know. That's the challenge that craft beer and craft mead face, because what they're trying to market.
I think, as you pointed out, it's a maturation process too. I think as you get older, you tend to drink a little bit less, but you also tend to drink better, I think.
Sure, yeah, I completely agree. But there is an educational obligation then for the craft beverage world to help those kids and young people to learn what it is about our beverages that's appealing and warrants merit.
Sure. Sure.
What is it about our beverages that are like literally better than fizzy water with some alcohol?
Well, I wanted to dive into mead because, of course, that's your specialty. Mead is very likely the oldest fermented beverage we have. How has mead shaped human history, and what role has it played in our culture?
Brad, I have been. I hope you'll forgive me for going off on a tangent here.
No, it's fine.
The thing that's been fascinating me over the last few months is that organisms on this planet have relationships with each other.
Oh, sure.
And all of the organisms and things that are involved in mead kind of converge. If you look at it, the first organism that's involved in all of this stuff is yeast. And yeast is about 400 million years old as an organism, right?
Yeah.
And yeast hits this combination about 120 million years ago, hits this combination of angiosperms, plants that make flowers and usually make a fruit, and bees. And bees and angiosperms go together perfectly, right? They both evolved between 120 and 130 million years ago together.
And they can't survive without each other.
They can't survive without each other. Well, there are also ways that all of these fruiting plants get their seeds spread out. And yeast comes along and plays this magnificent role that makes the fruit more appealing to the animals for them to eat and then take the seeds somewhere else. And so yeast and bees and honey all get related really quickly. Right?
Sure.
Fruit has sugar in it to make it appealing, and sugar is appealing to yeast. And so this whole thing, now those three species are intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
Yeast, honey, or yeast, bees, and fruit. And along come humans, and there's primates for a while, but the alcohol dehydrogenase gene in humans is 10 million years old.
Wow.
It predates Homo sapiens, Neanderthals. It predates anything that we call modern humans. It goes back in the Australopithecines and the various evolutionary iterations that end up being humans.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been involved. We jumped into that 3-part relationship package 10 million years ago.
Yeah, and like I said, I think mead has arguably got to be the oldest beverage, right?
It has to be.
All you have to do is take some honey and add a little water, and it's going to ferment, right?
There's a guy named Neil Rush right now, who's from South Africa, who is making the argument that humans have been actively controlling fermentations for 40,000 years, which would predate beer and virtually everything else.
Yeah.
He has found evidence of beeswax in caves in South Africa that was obviously extracted from a beehive and then wrapped in twine. And it's still got the twine markings on it. So it was manipulated, and it's 40,000 years old.
Yeah.
His argument is, if you have control of that kind of technology, you're going into beehives, you're taking the wax out and you're wrapping it up some way. And you also have control of the technologies like fire and bows and arrows. And his point is that human pharmacology goes back a long way, because we've been putting like poison-tipped arrows on things for tens of thousands of years.
Sure.
And so if you're capable of controlling that kind of chemical activity, you're probably also making mead. Right? If it does, as you said, it produces itself, well, your willingness to figure that out and make it happen for you, it probably goes back way further than we have given it credit for.
Yeah, I agree. So why do you think mead fell out of favor in modern society? I mean, it did play a huge role throughout history, religious ceremonies, all kinds of
Sure. Well, I want to point out one thing that hasn't gotten a whole lot of attention, and that is that there has really never, in any of the cultures that I know of, other than perhaps in Africa, and I mean, it goes back a long way in Eastern European cultures, but there has never really been a commercial mead trade anywhere in Western Europe or the United States.
Interesting.
It was always the beverage of kings, and it was the beverage of kings, and it was the beverage of the elite in religion, of popes and cardinals and people in monasteries, because the monasteries had access to the wealthy class.
Yeah, I mean, it was widely used from what I understand, religious ceremonies across the world.
Sure. It wasn't something though. This is one thing I've been looking at lately, and I haven't had enough time yet, but I also haven't had a lot of success at trying to find commercial examples of mead from the 1700s, 1600s, 1500s. I have yet to understand how in Western culture that was the case. And so now you hit the United States, right? Here we are in the U.S. and they knew about mead, but the founding people in our country worked very hard to avoid the aspects of royalty that were present in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States, there are no barons, there are no earls, there are no counts, there's no nobility at all.
True.
And in fact, the founding fathers worked very hard to reject the aspects of of European culture that reflected nobility. There aren't, we don't have estates, and we didn't divide up the property. We didn't divide things up according to, which nobles got what.
Mm-hmm.
We worked very hard to avoid that, and in fact, I mean, you could say there was a little antipathy towards those things here, and it may well be that is reflected in mead. Mead never caught on here, and if mead was the beverage of kings, and it has been for a long time, then there is something of a case to make for the fact that the American royalty, the American power structure, the American top, the top of the political structure in the United States wasn't really interested in mead, if that was a reflection of European nobility. And the other thing that's really true in the United States is it never caught on because honey is hard. I mean, honey has always been hard. It's the hardest thing that we use to ferment. It's you can't do anything automatically. The frames come out of the supers manually. The supers come off of the thing manually. Every aspect of it is you can spin the honey out now with a machine, but then you take those frames back out of the machine and put them back into the hive, and then manually put the hive back together again, and then manually take it out to the field again.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, honey production is still a family business across the whole of the United States, right?
It is both a small family business and intensely manual, intensely labor intensive.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been avoidable in any way that we can figure out yet. And that makes honey, has always made honey expensive. That's maybe why mead is the beverage of kings. It's certainly for us. I mean, it's why our mead is so expensive, because honey's just the most expensive thing you can ferment.
It is expensive. I was making 5-gallon batches. I mean, it can cost over $200 for a single 5-gallon batch, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, nowadays,
especially using fruit. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Nowadays, it's just incredibly expensive, even on a home scale.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that you can't make something really delicious for a few dollars a bottle that would cost you.
That's what I was.
A lot of dollars.
What I was going to say. I mean, if you look at the cost per bottle, it's actually relatively cheap compared to even wine out at the grocery store. But
oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But that said, the impediments to a really robust commercial mead trade in the U.S. have been substantial and remain substantial. Right now, the public doesn't even, because we didn't bring all that Eastern European and Western European nobility culture to the United States, mead is still unknown largely. I mean, I can go into a gourmet grocery store and find that 8 out of 10 people that I talk to and try to get the taste of my mead still aren't aware of what mead is and what it should be like.
Yeah, I mean, there's some people that also taste the mead and they get it, and some people don't, which I always find interesting. But I think that's true with any beverage.
Yeah.
Ken, we are running a little bit low on time, but I wanted to ask you where you are with the meadery right now. Is the tasting room open? Where can people purchase your amazing meads? They're, in my opinion, some of the finest ones in the world.
Well, we do direct-to-consumer sales in 26 states, and I would recommend that people go to schrammsmead.com, schrammsmead.com,
mm-hmm.
and you can order the things that we have in stock. We don't, because the production is cyclical, and we've only got so many tanks, and we've made far more labels than we have tanks. We don't always have everything all at the same time.
Sure,
but yeah, you can go on there, and we're into the heat of the year. There will probably be a few weeks left before things really get boiling. But we try to ship in a safe temperature window. So if you're going to order right now, you may have to pay for expedited shipping, or wait until it cools down in the fall before we're going to ship. I mean, expedited shipping on small orders can be, if you really want the mead, that'll work.
And do you have the tasting room open yet, or no?
Well, there isn't a tasting room per se. There is a tasting space at the production facility, and you can go on schrammsmead.com and you can book a tasting.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
You have to book ahead. We don't have a huge staff just sort of waiting there for you to show up. We have to put things on a schedule now, but we do have a tasting space, and Sean and Kristen and Allison and James and I regularly go in and conduct tastings for people and show them through the lineup and give people an opportunity to buy what they love. So that's a good thing. And you can, if you're in the Detroit area at any point, you can always order and hold your order for pickup at the meadery and pick it up when you get the chance.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to ask you as a final question, what do you see as a future for home brewing and home mead making? Where are we going next?
It's a cyclical thing, and I think the bumps that we have to work out right now, like all of media is changing. How people learn about things is changing, and how people have community is changing. And I think home brewing is going to have to make some adaptations to get to that. But I don't think it's going to go away. I really don't. I think it's too much fun, and the products that you make are too delicious for it to go away any more than making bread at home is going to ever go away. People are going to make bread. People are going to make their own pizza. People are going to make their own beer, because just like making your own cookies, what you can make in a small batch will almost always exceed the quality of what you can get buying from some macro producer in some Mylar package. You can really make great things and match them to your own tastes. And so I think that's going to help. I think there's going to have to be a change in the learning process. Things like TikTok and YouTube and Instagram are altering the way that information is shared. Mm-hmm. And I think the homebrewing community, the American Homebrewers Association, is going to have to adapt quickly to stay in touch with all of that. But I think it should, because the amount of information and the really the depth of really good information from those organizations needs to be in the mix. Because if you just let a sort of unmoderated internet happen and govern how the hobby is progressing, it's not going to turn out as well as if you have really good information, quality in and then quality out.
Yeah, I mean, I did a presentation recently for a club on mead making, and I was surprised the amount of bad information that was out there.
Oh,
and it's even worse with me. I mean, at least beer making, there is a body of knowledge now, and it has been kind of codified, and people can agree on a lot of things. But mead making, it seems to be, is still considered a bit of a black art.
People are still hashing over things like acid additions at the front of your mead making process, and whether or not pH is important and whether or not nutrients are important,
which we know is important.
There is science behind this, and I know maybe science isn't all that cool these days, but how things actually work is kind of important if you're going to get on an airplane or get in a car and then also maybe ferment something that costs you $200 for a batch.
Exactly. Well, Ken, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you taking time to come on the show.
Brad, it is always great to get a chance to talk to you, and I hope things are going really well for the BeerSmith, and that if there are rough seas, that they smooth out for all of us shortly.
Well, thank you again. My guest today was Ken Schramm, founder of Schramm's Meadery near Detroit and author of the book, The Complete Mead Maker. Thank you again, Ken. Great to have you on.
Thanks, Brad.
A big thank you to Ken Schramm for joining me this week. Thanks also to this week's sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They invite you to join their upcoming brewery workshop September 14th to 17th in Fort Collins, Colorado. If you're launching a brewery, you don't want to miss this 4-day event featuring top professional brewers who help you explore, plan, and start your own brewery. To learn more, visit breweryworkshop.com. Again, that's breweryworkshop.com. And BeerSmith Web, the online version of BeerSmith brewing software. BeerSmith for the web lets you design great beer recipes from any browser, including your tablet or phone. Edit recipes on the go with access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try BeerSmith Web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, a reminder to click that like and subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you're on. Clicking those buttons is a great way to support the show. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great brewing week.